Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? Hope that you're doing well wherever you are in the world today. I'm very excited to be back with you with another episode with my guest, Clint Ober. Clint, how are you today, my friend? What is happening in your world?
Well, I'm doing pretty good, Michael. I'm sitting out here in Southern California. The weather's pretty nice now, and it's that season of the year that I really enjoy. So I'm pretty content.
Good. That's a good place
And
to be, my friend. I
yes,
discovered you a few years ago on a mutual friend's podcast, and it really got me thinking about so many of the differentiations of life and in the way that we live now versus the way that we used to. As society changes, technology advances, we live in the electronic world. And
right.
I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. But before we dive in, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Okay. Well, I'm 78 years old, so I've been around a long time. And but I started out. I grew up in Montana as an outdoor cowboy. That's the boy that sits on a horse and rides around the pasture, looking at the cows, make sure they're healthy and make sure they're okay. And as long as they are, then, you can make a living doing that. But I it primarily, spent a lot of time in nature. And in the early days, growing up, um, I was taught prevention, taking care of animals in the wild and the livestock and so on. But it's always about prevention. You keep the pasture clean and pristine, then the cattle will be healthy, and then you can make a profit. If they get sick, you got to call the vet. You have to call the banker at the same time because after that, the vet and the bank own the cows.
So
So,
true.
so that's kind of where the background I come from. So prevention is something that's ingrained in me. And I come from the 40s. So back then, we didn't have all the institutions, all the medical, all the pills. We didn't have all the stuff that we have today. So you pretty much had to take care of yourself and take care of your health. And eat an apple a day, keep the doctor away was the mantra. So, anyhow, after I left that environment, I ended up falling in love with the communications industry, the cable television industry. I'm one of the official pioneers of the
Mm.
cable industry. And in that industry, we have to ground everything electrical to the earth. We have to ground the cables to the earth before we enter a home to, in case there's any lightning or static or noise or electrical interference in the area, and and to prevent lightning from entering the home and creating a fire. So grounding. So I learned about grounding. Everything electrical has to be grounded. Um, in the entire electronics and communication industry, grounding is a very big thing. It has to do with electrical stability. So you get good, clean signals, good, clean pictures, good, clean data for your computer, and so on and so on. So I spent about 30 years in that industry. So to me, I took grounding, for granted. Um, you ground everything in order to maintain electrical stability and have prevent fire and have clean pictures. So, uh, and that was all good, and never thought too much about it. But I retired from the cable industry when I was 50. It's 29 years ago, and the reason I retired was because I had a serious health situation. I developed a abscess in the liver from a root canal that was done, and I ended up losing the larger portion of my liver. And they didn't know at that time. This is a long time ago, um, but they didn't know for sure back then how much of the liver they could remove and how if you could survive. And on a very marginal area. But anyhow, I did go through with the surgery. I did survive, and in the process, because it could have gone either way at that time. But anyhow, I remember one of the docs told me when they discovered what was wrong, he said, "You need to go home and get your health in or get your house in order because we don't know how much of the liver they can work with." And so, anyhow, it's a long story. But anyhow, I ended up uh, well, they ended up saying, first of all, there's a chance you may not make it. So you have to have your affairs in order. And so I went home and did that, but it was kind of a shock because all of a sudden, you are a 50-year-old man, king of the mountain. Uh, Everything's going good. And you live in a A-frame, 5,000 square foot A-frame home in Evergreen, Colorado. I can see all the way to Vail. And but anyhow, so when was in the process of recovering from that, I ended up uh, just coming to terms with life. And the main thing that hit me was that, if I had died, my children would have come and taken some of the things in the home. And I had a huge collection of art. And I got to thinking, well, nobody would have ever have known why I purchased anything or why I did anything in my life when it come to material things. And so I called them all up and I said, I want you to come and get whatever you want. And then I'm going to give away everything else because what I realized in a moment while I was going through all of this is that, when you die, you don't take any of this stuff with you. And, and you spend your whole life collecting on these things and your life is about these things, but they really, what's going to happen to them when you're gone? The kids are going to take them or get rid of them or donate them or all these things. So it's kind of a shocking thing. And so I had this kind of an epiphany where I went through this thing where I all of a sudden I didn't want to own anything ever again. I just wanted to get rid of everything I owned because it just put fear in me. And I didn't want to own anything because I felt that when I ended up, I was being responsible for all these things I had collected. And but my life was about acquiring things, taking care of things. And, and, so anyhow, I just had this epiphany that I didn't want to own anything. I wanted to let go of everything. And I wanted to make my life about something more important, something that had significance or not significance to anybody else in the world. Because when you die alone. There's nobody there with you. But I wanted to be happier the next time I die or come close to dying. I want to be able to be happy with myself, feel like I was here, something other than a great consumer. I wanted to do things that I wanted to be of service. I wanted to be of help. So anyhow, after that, I sold everything. I sold the house, and I bought a small RV. And I spent 4 years traveling around the United States, just going from national parks because that's where I felt the best. And I was single. I was just kind of alone. My children are all out on their own. And anyhow, so I ended up down in Key Largo, Florida, on the bayside of the Gulf down there. And I'd been there for a few months. And I, one night I was kind of, because I'm a nature boy, I just have a lot of nature in me. But I felt like, I needed to go back to work. I needed to go do something worthwhile. I didn't know what to do, but I was, I was just standing there looking out over the bay, and I had this feeling come over me, and these words came to my mind. The first one was, become an opposite charge. To me, being an electrical background, that means go out and poke people or stir them up or do something, get them excited. Like rounding up the cows, go charge them up. And then about a half hour later, I wrote down a second thing that just popped into my mind, status quo is the enemy. Didn't know what to think about any of it. But I wrote it down on a yellow piece of paper, still have it 30 years, almost, 20 some years later. And, so anyhow, I didn't think too much about it, but I had a feeling come over me that I had to go back west, where I was from back in, California, Arizona, and Montana. And so I had to go back and do something. So I headed back. And when I got there, first of all, I went to San Diego. That didn't feel comfortable. Then I ended up going back to Tucson, and that didn't feel right. So I thought, well, I'll go to Flagstaff, Arizona, because they have pine trees and snow. Like Montana, it's cold, something I'm used to. And on the way up, I headed up there late in the afternoon from Phoenix, and it got late in the day, and so it was about 10 o'clock. I said, "Well, I'm not going to go any further." There's a little sign that pointed to Sedona, Arizona, with a campground sign, and so I thought, "Well, I'll just pull in there and drive up to Flagstaff in the morning." Well, anyhow, I woke up the next morning and I looked out the window. And I said, "Wow, I'm not leaving here. This is like living in a national park." So I spent a couple of years in Sedona, and while I was there, I um, accidentally ended up getting involved in the art gallery business or the art galleries, helping them light up their art shows and so on. So I started working with electrical again, and and I owned a lot of art, so I knew that art needs to be presented properly in order for people to appreciate what the artist is trying to present. And so I started doing some professional lighting for these. Nobody could pay for it; they didn't have enough money. But I loved lighting art. So anyhow, one day I was ordering some stuff on a computer, and the computer kept crashing. This is back in the late '90s, and you didn't have a lot of good internet or anything like that. But anyhow, the computer kept crashing. So every time it would crash, I'd have to shut it down, bring it back up, and then try to order my stuff. And so anyhow, I realized that it was static electricity that was causing the glitches on the computer because the computer wasn't grounded or anything back then. And so anyhow, I laid a strip of copper tape across my desk, and I connected it to an electrical ground. And then I would touch the copper strip before I touched my keyboard to get rid of the static on my body from the dry air there. And and then I could type away and everything was fine. Solved the problem. And so my grounding came back. So a few minutes later, I walked outdoors and I sat down on a bench across from Tlaquepaque, which is a tourist area there in Sedona. And a big tour bus pulls up. And this is a Japanese tour group. And they're a little shorter in stature, um, but anyhow, so when they started marching off the bus, they all had white Nike tennis shoes on, they were like they had been to a strip mall that had Nike um, tennis shoes on or athletic shoes on sale. But anyhow, they were big. They seemed big, and so anyhow, I just looked at it and don't know where this came from. It was intuitive. So I asked myself, I wonder if there's a consequence to humans no longer being naturally grounded. Because when I was a kid, in the 40s and the early 50s, we were barefoot all the time. We never wore shoes unless we were going to school or church or some event. And and when we did wear shoes, they were leather. So we had to, if it rained, we had to carry them so they didn't get wet, because if they got wet, then they'd curl up and then you get in trouble when you got home. Um, so so anyhow, I didn't know, and so I went home that night and I did the same thing that I did with the computer at home. I first of all, I went around the house and took a meter and started measuring all of the electrical charges like static electricity, EMF, just all of the electromagnetic interference or electromagnetic noise that's in our homes. It's everything from airplanes to police cars I mean, it's just relentless today. And then we had cell phones on it today. So if you could see frequencies, you wouldn't be able to see anything because everything would be pitch black because there's so much noise out there. So anyhow, in the process, I went home that night and I started playing around and I started measuring all these frequencies on my body when I was walking around the house. So I went back to the hardware store, bought a roll of 3-inch wide metal duct tape, brought it home, laid it across my bed. There's more to the story, but laid it across my bed, threw ground wire out the window, connected it to the earth, and then I went in and laid down on the tape. And then as long as I was laying on the tape, then I was shielded or protected from all of these electromagnetic frequencies and fields and so on. And the thing that happened when I laid down that night, back then I was 54 or something like that. And I had, being a cowboy, skied for 30 years, played tennis. I've done everything. And my body was full of aches and pains all the time, chronic. Um, you know how men are, no pain, no gain. So anyhow, I laid it across my bed and I lay down on that tape and I was playing with a voltmeter. And then the next thing I knew, it was morning. And I thought, wow, there's something going on here because normally I can't fall asleep. I had to take Advil to go to sleep, or I had to take some kind of a pain med because I had so much chronic pain. And I was at that 50 plus age. And so, anyhow, I played with it for a couple of days and it kept, again, at night, as long as I was laying on the tape, the grounded metal that was connected to the earth, then my body was grounded. I could test it with a meter and see that I was at earth potential. And then I would automatically fall asleep better. And then a couple of days after that, I got a hold of one of my buddies who I was spending time with there with helping me light the galleries and stuff. And he had arthritis and he had, a lot of pain in his body. And I said, and couldn't sleep. And I said, well, you need to try this. And I said, it sounds crazy, but you got to try this. So I went and put some tape on his bed and his wife almost threw me out of the house. But anyhow, so hooked it up and he laid on it that night. And I didn't hear anything from him for a couple of days, but he got a hold of me and he said, do you think this could have any effect on my arthritis? And I says, no, I think it's just makes the noise go away. And then you sleep better. Your nervous system is quieter and so on. And he said, well, my arthritis is way down. Then I realized that my chronic pain was almost gone. And then I said, okay, how come I don't know about this? How come somebody doesn't know that being grounded makes pain go away?
We'll be right back to today's show, but first I need to ask you a question. Are you feeling stuck? Are you feeling like you don't have the support to go to the next level in your healing journey? Are you feeling like you wish you had a little bit more support from not only myself, but the Unbroken Nation? Well, my friend, I want to invite you to come and join our live weekly coaching sessions in Think Unbroken. All you have to do is go to Keys, Keys, keys.thinkunbroken.com to sign up and join us today with 100% money back, no questions asked, guaranteed, and no contract or commitment. Every week for the next year, you can come and be a part of our live coaching sessions each Monday as we dive deep into not only answering your questions, but questions from the Unbroken Nation and help you take all of the information that you learn in the podcast, in the courses, and other areas of this journey, bring them into your life and use it in a way that is practical, life-changing, and transformative. So my friend, join us at keys.thinkunbroken.com, and we will see you this Monday.
Yeah, and that's
And
one of the things that's really fascinating, Clint, is that when I first off, and thank you for that story. I love the backstory, and I wanted to give you space to share it because of A, your expertise, and B, because this is a subject matter nobody ever talks about. I've done my research now on it more and more over the years. And
uh-huh.
one of the things I think would be really important is if we can actually create some context and maybe definitions around a few of these words so we don't lose people as we get a little bit deeper. So
Okay.
can you explain grounding to us?
Okay. First of all, the earth has a natural, what we call a negative surface charge. Negative means no charge, means an abundance of free electrons. They're kind of like, it's like, well, so it's a store of electrons. I mean, they're actually stored on the surface of the earth. And so we connect everything electrical to the earth so that those free electrons can go up or down a ground rod and reduce charge. The most natural thing you can relate to would be lightning. If there's a buildup of positive charge in the clouds, negative on the earth, then there'll be a fissure of lightning go up into the air, and then the electrons will go up or down in order to reduce and to reduce that charge in the clouds. And then the rain comes and then it all dissipates and goes away. So in the real world, like anybody working on electronic chips or software, gasoline, um, gunpowder, fireworks, any of those they all have to be grounded when they're handling that so they don't create a spark from their clothing or something and create a fire. So grounding is about reducing charge. preventing, because charge can create a spark and create a fire. And it can create electrical noise and disturbances, in the electronics and signals and TV signals and sound and all of those kind of things. So it's really about maintaining the electrical stability. So as long as something is connected to the Earth, then the Earth will provide enough electrons automatically to prevent this noise or to prevent a fire. So am I answering the question? Am
Yeah,
I
yeah.
touch?
Yeah, that
Okay.
makes sense. What I'm curious about, so if the earth keeps us grounded, right? And what I
Yes.
what came to mind as you were sharing this, I learned how to put computers together when I was about 15. And we
Yep.
always had to have the anti-static mats, and that's so we
Yes.
didn't fry the motherboard, so we didn't fry the hard drives. And what I'm wondering is, like, are we constantly getting fried right now because we're so removed from being grounded to the earth? And if so, is that negatively impacting our health, our inflammation, our pain?
Well, what grounding is about, what the discovery of, and the end effect of grounding is, what we found was throughout all time, all living species on the planet were connected to the earth in some way, either fish in the oceans, whatever. However, we all got here, doesn't matter. But anyhow, we were always grounded. And it's only been like, well, in reality, it was 60 years ago, we invented plastics. The first thing we did was put them on the soles of our shoes, carpet our homes, and plasticize everything. Today, everything is plasticized to the point, covered in plastic to the point that, so what this plastic does is it insulates you from the earth. When you no longer, the human body is no longer naturally grounded. To give you an example, no, it's too early for that. Okay. So anyhow, throughout all time, from all the way back to the beginning, we were naturally grounded. Our bodies evolved in a grounded state. And it was only 1960, or a few years before, we invented plastics. The first thing we did, like I said, put them on the shoes and insulate our environments. So all of a sudden we lost our ground. As a human, we no longer touched the ground. And so what happened was, and we didn't know it, it took us, 10 years to paste all this together, but inflammation, the word inflammation was not in the English language in 2000. So, 23 years ago, inflammation first entered the English language. And inflammation is just what it says, inflame. And they refer to the body full of inflammation. The body is on fire. Okay, so that's what grounding is about, is preventing fire. So anyhow, what we had to do is we learned early on that grounding reduced pain automatically. We did not know why. It took us 6, 7 years to figure that out. But we had to look at the body and because nobody knew why grounding reduced pain. The only people that would even have a clue what was going on with grounding would be somebody with an electronics background. Even like you said, grounding yourself to prevent static, to fry a motherboard. Same concept here. So we're trying to prevent, instead of frying a motherboard, frying the body. So what happens is, when you lose your ground, then your body's no longer negative. Other than that, you have a slight negative charge. The key here is you can't have inflammation in a grounded object, whether it's a computer or a person or an animal or a plant. It's like, to give you an idea, inflammation doesn't exist in the wild animal population. It only exists in humans and animals that live indoors with their owners.
Hmm,
Okay, so that's
it's
the big,
fascinating.
yeah, that's the big giveaway. But nobody looks at it from that way. Yeah, I mean, nobody. So anyhow, what we had to do is we had to trace down. So what in the body is causing inflammation? We know that by all we were doing is grounding the body, and so it has earth potential, or negative, this slight negative charge. Well, that negative charge is an abundance of free electrons that automatically move and reduce charge. It's automatic. It's just automatic Earth. It's an automatic phenomenon. You don't have to do anything other than touch the Earth. So as time went on, we learned that neutrophils, white blood cells in the body, if you have an injury or a pathogen, or you have a damaged cell or something, the immune system releases or sends a neutrophil over to the site of the crime or the injury or whatever, and it releases what they call reactive oxygen species. Reactive means they're electrically charged. As soon as we learned that, then we knew we were on the right path. So these electrically charged molecules, then, so the neutrophil will wrap itself around a pathogen or a damaged cell and release these reactive oxygen species, and they will rip electrons from the damaged cell or the pathogen and destroy it. That's how the immune system works. So it's electrical. So then what we realized that so when you have chronic pain in the body, then it's like they say, you have inflammation, body is on fire. So what is causing the fire? So what we learned was when you are ungrounded, no longer naturally grounded, then your body is short free electrons. You don't have an abundance of free electrons or an abundance of redox potential. So what happens is if there's any remaining reactive oxygen species after the initial oxidative burst, then those remaining radicals will go and rip an electron from a healthy cell and damage it. It sends a message back to the immune system. Something's still here getting me. So the immune system sends another neutrophil. It does, and it goes and fixes that problem. But in the process, it turns into a chronic loop. It's an autoimmune loop. The autoimmune system is automatically producing and creating reactive oxygen and trying to put out the fire, but it's done its job. But now these excess radicals are oxidizing healthy tissue. So the immune system now is trying to put out a fire that it itself is creating.
And is that because it's overcorrecting and trying to get you back to balance?
Well, it's trying to reduce oxidative damage in your body. It's trying to reduce radicals or damaged tissue to eliminate them. But in the process, there's not enough free electrons to reduce the remaining radicals that are produced by the neutrophils. And if you don't reduce them, they're only going to last a few nanoseconds. So they quickly move and latch onto and steal an electron from a healthy cell, damage it, which provokes or promotes the immune system to release another oxidative burst. And so the body is just slowly burning. It's on fire. It's slowly burning.
That makes a lot of sense. So in that, with understanding that and how that occurs, are there like obviously looking at being ungrounded, right? We always have shoes on.
Yeah,
Nobody really like I live in a city, so there's no
sure.
backyards anymore. The
Right.
office is covered in carpet, the cars, the shoes, you see people and the heels of their shoes are now 2 inches thick.
Yep.
Oh, so we know that those elements are keeping us ungrounded. What
Yes.
about the impact of the electromagnetic elements that are in our environment? Wi-Fi, wireless headphones, cell phones, televisions, things like this. Are these things negatively impacting our groundedness as well?
No, grounding has 100% to do with physical contact with the earth, which
Okay.
is it's a natural phenomenon. If you are ungrounded, it's just like if you were to unground some of your equipment in your studio, then you may get noise or you may get issues. So uh, these electric fields and static electricity, they can create pops and and noise and things like that. Um, but they're they are a secondary stressor, but they're not the promoter of autoimmune disease or any of these inflammation-related health disorders. Um, but if you're ungrounded, then your whole system is off because the human body was always grounded. It was meant to be grounded. We are, you know, we we're from the earth. We live on the earth. We live from the earth, and we spent, I mean, we are to me, I put it this way: we're the earth of walking around. We're part of everything that exists, as the earth. And so when we disconnect and we lose our ground, or we lose that natural immunity from fire, from inflammation in the body, when that's gone, then the body, these uh, healthy or these issues manifest. So the body is becoming stressed because it's on fire, or it's no longer, it's positively charged. It's not negatively charged.
And
And
when this happens, does this start to put you into like a sympathetic state in terms of the central nervous system?
well, what happens is, no, it's just the opposite. Uh, when you're ungrounded, then you're more likely to be in a chronically elevated sympathetic state.
Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? We'll be right back to today's episode, but I want to take a moment and invite you to Think Unbroken Conference. That's right. Our next conference is happening right around the corner this December with amazing speakers from around the world who are leaders in personal development, trauma education, mindset, and more. All you have to do to register to watch for free, that's right, $0. Come and join us, is go to myunbrokenlife.com, register and sign up. You can get access to the free event. Watch live with us this December. It'll be myself speaking along with amazing human beings like Anthony Trucks, Jamie Bronstein, Leslie Logan, and a special interview that I'm doing with Dr. Gabor Mate that has never before been released. So come and join us, myunbrokenlife.com. All you have to do is put in your email. We'll send you over the registration. You'll be able to come and join us, watch live. And then if you want access to the recordings or more information there for you to keep them forever. But in the meantime, go sign up. Block it off on your calendar. This is going to be a transformational experience that you do not want to miss. Head over to myunbrokenlife.com to register for free. Until next time, be unbroken.
Meaning, your sympathetic nervous system senses everything in the environment: noise, sound, temperature, sun, just everything in the environment. So and then you have a parasympathetic, which releases hormones to dampen, like if you're in a fight or flight state, which then your cortisol becomes elevated. This is all related to this. The sympathetic senses, a threat, and then your fight or flight kicks in, your cortisol skyrockets, and then you have a parasympathetic over here that releases, um, hormones to dampen the effect of this cortisol and so on. And that's all good, and it works. It works really well in the animal world. And it did but today there's so much noise and so much interference. We lost our senses, but anyhow, so what's going on with everybody is everybody is chronically stressed because they're ungrounded, and their body is very sensitive to all of these things that go on in our environment, our relationships, just everything that's going on, and all of the emotions. And so what happens is we have so much stress in our lives that our parasympathetic nervous system, which operates, releases hormones and to dampen the effect of this stress, eventually it becomes exhausted, and it can no longer buffer the cortisol or the chronically elevated sympathetic stress. And so then the body becomes fatigued. And then eventually, if you continue to live that way, then the cortisol continues to build. And eventually it's going to create anxiety, irritability, depression, and then it leads on to a chronic health disorder like an autoimmune disorder. And and it just goes on and on. Then if you don't take care of it, then you're going to end up going to the doc, and it starts out with the ladies with fibromyalgia, then it goes to lupus, MS, then to cancer, then cardiovascular disease. All of these health disorders are because the immune system or immune systems are compromised. I always like to say this, health is the body's most natural state. Go sit on a rock in the woods and watch the animals. They have health and it's natural. It's a gift. If you do not have health and you have pain in your body, then something you're doing, something in your environment, something going on is interfering with your immune system's ability to maintain health. And
Yeah.
so you have to remove what that is or add back in this case, ground, because it needs ground. It
Yeah.
needs those free electrons from the earth to prevent fire in the body, to prevent inflammation, for the immune system to function like it was designed.
That makes perfect sense because so often you hear people talk about the research and the evidence about being in nature, about getting reconnected to Mother Earth, about the fact that, and I agree with you entirely. I mean, like really, you break it down as humans, we just happen to be a really, really evolved animal, right?
Yes.
But you look back at any of the lineage of the development of the human species, we were outside for the vast majority of it. We've only
Yeah.
been inside dwellers for, 100 years now, if that. So one of the
Yes.
things that I'm wondering here, Clint, for people who are listening to this and they're like, okay, I hear you. I feel like I'm probably ungrounded. I don't even know the last time my feet touched grass. Like, what are some of the things that people can do? What are like 3 things that people could start executing and adding to their life to start to get grounded again?
Yeah. The thing that I teach the most, when I first discovered the health effects of grounding, and I was working with, NIH and other people that do research and California Health Sciences and so on. And the first thing that they told me to do that, we understand what you're doing, and but before you go out and tell the people, you have to have a no-cost solution, and then you have to have a low-cost solution so that
Mhm.
people can incorporate it into their lives. And so the number one thing I've always promoted and always will is, and especially for women, at the end of the day, I mean, you're operating on cortisol all day long, from all of the fight or flight and all of the stresses of life. And so at night, when you come home, you have to drain that cortisol out of your body and the inflammation related to it. So you have to come home at night. If you can't do anything else, then you take your shoes off, go out in the backyard, put your bare feet on the earth, and sit there for 30 minutes. It will change your life. I mean, you will be a different person because what you're doing is you're draining the inflammation, resetting the body. Then, and then you're going to feel better. Then you can be more present and you don't have that anxiety and irritability and you know um, all the things that go with being ungrounded. And that's one thing. um, Sometimes taking a hot bath is good, and those kind of things, but you need a routine. You need to be grounded for some, and the number one thing, any amount of grounding is good, but more is better, because in nature, you would be grounded 24/7. You could not have autoimmune disease, inflammation related health disorders. And that's everything from autism to lupus to cancer to cardiovascular disease. You name it, there's 100 of them. And, but these are all inflammation related health disorders. So, so you want to be grounded as much as possible and reduce the inflammation as much as possible. So along the way, when we did all of our research, we developed a handful of products called they're ground planes, meaning they are conductive like bed mats or sheets that you can put on your bed, connected to an electrical ground, and the ground which is connected to the earth. Then when you come home at night, you only do this one time. Then you put your sheet over the top of it, and then you just lay down and go to sleep. You don't have to do any extra work. You don't have to do anything. You just lay down and go to sleep. And then you're grounded all night long, which is really important if you can do this, because During sleep is when the body heals and restores itself. So during that process, you need to reduce as much inflammation as you can because it's not supposed to be there in the first place, but so that the immune system can restore and repair the body and restore and return the body to normal. Because the immune system only knows to do one thing: return the body to normal. If you remove the stresses that are interfering with the immune system's ability to function, then it will only do one thing: it will return your health to normal.
Mm.
It's automatic. You see it in the animal world, and we're so removed that it's hard to see this. But anyhow, so there's these sleep mats those are products that we developed during our research projects in order to test the benefits of earthing and how to ground people and to do all of the studies. There's about 35, 40 studies that are published now. And we have the book, the movie, all those things now. But anyhow, so the best thing to do is experiment with it, put your feet on the earth, on the grass, and notice the changes in your body and your respiration and your heart rate. I could go on and on about studies about, how it changes your blood viscosity, how your circulation improves. For the ladies, I tell them it's a beauty product. If you put your feet on the earth for 30 minutes, you're going to look 10 years younger because your blood normalizes, your blood viscosity normalizes. Now you have improved circulation. Blood can get into the capillaries, clean up the damage and the inflammation in your tissue, and so you're going to look healthier. You're going to feel better.
What about I have a question I have to ask because I live in inclement weather climate and
Uh-huh.
it gets freezing cold here, man. And so
Yes.
I'm wondering, like, when you live in most of Northern America, across the hemisphere,
Yep.
what what can people do in like late fall, winter, early spring when there's ice, there's snow on the ground? Are we still like go put your feet out on the ground and like freeze your toes off? Like, what do you do then?
No, that's not a very good idea. Um, you know, yeah, it's like I can get into it technically, but most of the animals, they don't live standing up in the snow. I mean, they have burrows and they have do this and do that and whatever, but they have skin and they're protected because of the way they are. Um, the reason when we did the studies, we ask ourselves, okay, what is the best thing we can do to help people be grounded at home uh, during sleep, the time when the body heals and restores itself? And that's when we decided we would take these ground planes that we are using for our studies and try to make products that people could put on their bed, plug it into their electrical ground, because the electrical ground in your house, that third round hole in the electrical outlet, goes to the earth. That's an earth ground. So the only way you're going to touch the earth comfortably is to use your electrical ground, or you can drive a ground rod in if you don't have a normal ground, and run a wire into your house and connect it to one of these conductive sleep mats and lay down and go to sleep, and like sleeping outdoors in the pasture, like I did when I was a kid. But
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because one of the things that I do is I give myself sun exposure barefoot in winter. And I
yes,
can only tolerate that depending on the day for maybe 2 minutes, some days longer.
yeah,
And I realize it's not always sustainable.
yes,
Clint, I think there's so much information you've put out in the world, so much that we can find and access. And personally, I wanted to have this conversation with you because I go back to times where I've traveled the world, where I've lived on beaches, where I've lived on islands, where I've lived
yeah,
in places where I can be accessible to nature. And as someone who has anxiety and PTSD, it's been incredible. And to even end this conversation thinking to myself, the second this is over, I'm going to go outside to the park across the street and stand barefoot for half an hour. Right.
that,
Um, but obviously, we can only cover so much information in a short period of time. Before I ask you my last question, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and about grounding?
yeah. They can go to ultimatelongevity.com. And they have all the information. The studies are all there. The movies there. They can get the book there. But anything you want to know, you can go to that website and they'll supply whatever information anybody would like, or if anybody has questions. But just that's the easiest resource for everybody to go and take a look at all of this and learn a little bit about it. And
Brilliant. Yeah. And of course, we'll put the links in the show notes for the
yeah,
audience.
sure.
My last question for you, my friend, what does it mean to you to be unbroken?
Well, unbroken. I spent a lot of my life broken in many different ways, emotionally, uh, physically, sometimes. A lot of pain, a lot of stress in my life. And the most important thing and that's why they granted. Today, I'm 78 years old. I have perfect health. I don't have cardiovascular disease. I don't have any health issues. I no longer have uh, anything. So unbroken means to be healthy and happy. And being in nature provides that for me. Being grounded to the earth, connected to the earth, that provides it to me. So it's really about happiness and wholeness. And you're just a nicer person. You're a better person. You're you're of more value to to everybody that you can have that you're involved with or come in contact with. So you're an asset. So being unbroken is the only place to be. So do
Mm,
whatever you got to do to get there.
I love that, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. Unbroken Nation, thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, share, tell a friend. And until next time, my friends, be unbroken. I'll see
Right.
you.
Hey, Unbroken Nation, we'll be right back to the show, but I wanted to let you know that you can grab a copy of my first book, Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, for free. If you go to book.thinkunbroken.com, you can download the PDF ebook version of the book and get everything that I know about the baseline of healing trauma for free, downloaded to your email right now. Just go to book.thinkunbroken.com to download your copy of Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma for a PDF for your phone. Again, that is book.thinkunbroken.com. Thank you so much for listening to Think Unbroken. Please share this episode with someone who could use it and help us move forward in our mission of ending generational trauma in our lifetime. And if you would, please take 5 seconds to pop on iTunes or Spotify, hit that 5-star, leave a review, and you can also reach out to us on social at Michael Unbroken or at Think Unbroken. And of course, you can check out our YouTube channel at Think Unbroken. Thank you for being a part of Unbroken Nation, my friends. And until next time, be unbroken.